Well, a potential legal battle is brewing in San Francisco. The city plans to open the jailhouse doors and release illegal immigrants busted for minor offenses before they can be picked up for deportation by federal authorities. Now, this move is the latest in a battle between some cities and the federal government over a program to automatically check the immigration status of people picked up for minor offenses. So is San Francisco really within its legal rights here? Is this headed to court? Let's bring in our legal panel. Former prosecutor Doug Burns joins us and defense attorney Joel Mann. Good to see you both. Doug, let me start with you.
Sure.
This federal system, as we say, automatically and electronically checks the immigration status of anybody who's busted.
Right.
Legally, can San Francisco do this? Can the city actually ignore a federal program that's been sanctioned by both the executive branch and Congress?
Well, this is a hot-button political issue, Greg. It's not just legal. I mean, legally, of course, the correct answer is no, they can't. Federal law requires that they check the immigration status and make them available to Immigration Custom Enforcement, ICE, which is part of Homeland Security. So there's really no argument. I mean, the counter-argument is going to be, that this is a national political issue and that, as the President of the United States himself said, we need a national unified response so we don't have the fragmentation, by the way, of the Arizona situation where it's in the courts and now the new Utah law.
Yeah. Joel, this ICE program is actually very successful. Here's what it's achieved. Let's put it up on the screen. 7 million people have had their fingerprints run through the program. Roughly 197,000 were ID'd as suspected illegals, 40% of those in California. 102,000 have been deported. 26% of those deported were convicted of major crimes, major drug offenses and violent crimes. Does San Francisco, Joel, have any legal justification for defying federal law and deliberately undermining what turns out to be a pretty effective program?
Now, Greg, what you failed to put up on as one of the graphics is that 30% of the people that were deported under that program were actually convicted of no crimes whatsoever, and in fact not even charged with crimes. So what's most offensive are the people the people that are being brought in. Now, what the city of San Francisco has done is said, look, we know how to monitor our community the best. And what's important to remember here is that San Francisco isn't saying, let's ignore the serious offenders and not make them part of this. What San Francisco is saying is that the minor offenses like jaywalking, trespassing, things like that, that really have very little to no criminal basis whatsoever, that they should not be forced to be a participant of this. And what Doug doesn't tell you is that the federal government can't force San Francisco in doing this. This is an unfunded mandate that the federal government can't force them to do that. There's that supremacy
clause. Doug, Congress passed a law back in 1996 that makes even minor crimes grounds for deportation. And moreover, that same law specifically outlaws sanctuary cities. I'm going to put it up on the screen here. A federal, state, or local government entity or official may not prohibit or restrict any government entity or official from sending to or receiving from the Immigration and Naturalization Service information regarding the citizenship or immigration status, lawful or unlawful, of any individual. Look, Doug, criminal prosecutions against sanctuary providers have actually been upheld in the famous case U.S. versus Aguilar. Should elected officials in San Francisco be prosecuted?
Look, I agree with Joel. I'm going to come right out and say that the crimes committed by so-called illegal aliens, those statistics are often purposefully distorted by politicians. However, having said that, I think Joel and I are wrestling over what's the correct solution to the problem. In other words, if somebody is detained for a speeding ticket, okay, yes, that's a minor offense, but guess what? That person, a couple of former federal agents were quoted as saying, there have been 3 or 4 fairly well-known cases, I don't need to cite them chapter and verse, where those particular people on minor situations were wanted, A, for much more serious offenses, and B, Greg, as you said, they're here illegally to start with.
Right, Joel, look, when a city provides sanctuaries for illegals, they are acting outside of the law. Federal law specifically states that it's a felony, and I'll quote it here, to conceal, harbor, or shelter illegal aliens. That's 8 U.S. Code Section 1324. Shouldn't city officials be prosecuted, Joel? They are aiding and abetting criminality.
First of all, absolutely not. what you're indicating is completely an aversion of what is actually going on in San Francisco. The Secure Communities Program, which is what the sheriff in San Francisco says we're no longer going to participate as to minor offenses, is just what the ICE has said it was, is that it's just a sharing of information. And the fact that they say, look, we don't want to share that information anymore, there is nothing that can force them to share this information. You know, you cited the supremacy clause, but you also need to remember that there are states' rights. There are states' rights, Doug, and you know that. You know that, Doug.
You know, Doug, Article 6, Clause 2 of the U.S. Constitution, the supremacy clause, I mentioned it before, it establishes that federal law is the supreme law of the land. It mandates that all states must follow federal law when a conflict arises between federal and state and cities.
Also, Joel, if you put aside...
You know, it's interesting that you mentioned that. It's interesting that you mentioned that, because ICE themselves actually couldn't even figure out whether this program was a program that they had to do, or if they could opt out. In fact, the entire state of Illinois has decided, in fact, to opt out of this program. So
and they're
it's
in
not
violation
just San Francisco doing this. No, actually, they're not.
Doug?
Our country stands for the proposition that we follow laws, okay? And you're supposed to hold somebody for 72 hours so that Homeland Security, Joel, can determine whether they're in this country illegally. If you think that the sanctuary program is okay, that's fine. But you're going to have to enact it through the legislative process.
All right, Doug Burns, Joel Mann, good to see you both. Interesting discussion. We'll wait and see if anybody's going to be prosecuted over this. I'm kind of guessing not. But thanks.
Thank you.
All right.